The sun was setting over Washington, D.C., casting a golden hue over the city as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Inside a bustling press room, Barron Trump, now a young man in his early 20s, stood at the podium, his sharp blue eyes scanning the crowd of journalists. The room was packed, the air thick with anticipation. Cameras clicked and reporters shuffled their notes, eager to capture whatever headline-worthy moment might unfold. Barron adjusted the microphone, his calm demeanor belying the weight of the moment. He knew what was coming. He had spent his entire life under scrutiny, his every move dissected and analyzed. But this time, he was ready. "Barron," a journalist began, his tone dripping with arrogance, "there's been a lot of speculation about your faith. Are you Muslim?" The room fell silent. The question hung in the air like a thunderclap, heavy and charged. Barron's jaw tightened for a moment, but then he smiled a small, knowing smile. He had expected this. He had prepared for it. But more importantly, he had lived it. "Thank you for your question," Barron began, his voice steady but filled with quiet intensity. "It's interesting how quickly we jump to assumptions about people based on rumors or appearances. But instead of answering directly, I'd like to share a story, a personal experience that changed my perspective on faith, connection, and the importance of understanding one another." He paused, letting his words sink in. The room was captivated. Even the arrogant journalist seemed momentarily disarmed. Barron's story wasn't just a response to a question, it was an invitation to listen, to learn, and to see the world through someone else's eyes. And as he began to speak, the room leaned in, ready to hear a story that would stay with them long after the cameras stopped flashing. Barron took a deep breath and began, "A few years ago, when I was in college, I was invited to an iftar dinner by my best friend Amir. Amir is Muslim, and he wanted me to experience Ramadan with his family. At the time, I didn't know much about Ramadan or Islam, but I trusted Amir, and I wanted to understand what this time meant to him and his family." He looked out at the crowd, his voice softening as he recalled the memory. "I remember walking into Amir's family's apartment in Brooklyn. Amir's family welcomed me with open arms, and I immediately felt at ease." Barron's voice grew more emotional as he continued. "When the sun set, Amir's father led the family in breaking their fast. He said a prayer of gratitude, and I remember feeling this overwhelming sense of peace. It wasn't just about the food, it was about the connection, the unity. Everyone at the table was there for each other, sharing not just a meal, but their lives." He paused, his eyes glistening. "As we ate, Amir's family shared stories about their lives, about growing up in Jordan, about their struggles and their dreams. And they asked me about my life too. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't being judged for my last name or my family. I was just Barron, a friend sharing a meal with people who cared about me." Barron's voice trembled slightly as he recalled the most emotional part of the evening. "At the end of the meal, Amir's father asked me if I wanted to say a few words. I was nervous, but I stood up and looked around the table at these people who had welcomed me so openly. I said, 'I didn't know what to expect tonight, but what I've experienced here has moved me in ways I can't fully express. Ramadan isn't just about fasting, it's about reflection, gratitude, and community. It's about understanding the struggles of others and coming together to support one another." He took a deep breath, his voice breaking. "I told them that I've spent my life in the public eye, judged and misunderstood because of my name. But that night, I felt seen not as Barron Trump, but as a person, and that's a gift I'll never forget." The room was silent, hanging on his every word. Even the arrogant journalist had lowered his notepad, his expression unreadable. Barron wiped a tear from his eye and steadied himself. "So, to answer your question," he said, his voice firm now, "I'm not Muslim, But that's not the point. The point is that I learned something that night that changed me forever. I learned that faith in any form is about connection and compassion. It's about stepping outside your comfort zone to understand someone else's world. He looked directly at the journalist. Instead of asking divisive questions, maybe we should be asking how we can build bridges, how we can learn from one another, how we can create a world where understanding replaces judgment. The room erupted in applause. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment. Barron stepped away from the podium, his heart lighter. He had shared his story, and in doing so he had planted a seed of understanding that he hoped would grow. As he left the room, a young reporter approached him. "Thank you," she said, her eyes shining. "Your story reminded me why I became a journalist, to tell stories that matter." Barron smiled. "That's all any of us can do," he replied. "Tell stories that matter. And maybe, just maybe, change the world." And with that he walked away, leaving behind a room full of people who would never forget the lesson he had taught them. Barron's story is more than just a personal anecdote. It's a powerful reminder of the importance of empathy, understanding, and respect in a world that often feels divided. His experience challenges us to ask ourselves, how often do we make assumptions about others, and how can we replace those assumptions with curiosity and openness? In a world where labels and stereotypes often dominate the conversation, Barron's story serves as a call to action. It reminds us that every person has a story, a history, and a depth that cannot be captured by a single word or category. It urges us to look beyond the surface, to listen with an open heart, and to seek connection rather than division. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the city in a warm amber glow, Barron stepped outside the press room and took a deep breath. The weight of the moment lingered, but so did a sense of hope. He had shared his truth, and in doing so, he had sparked a conversation, one that he hoped would ripple outward, touching lives and inspiring change. Barron's story leaves us with powerful lessons about empathy, understanding, and the importance of human connection. But it also invites us to reflect on our own lives and actions. What do you take away from this story? Does it remind you of a time when you judged someone too quickly, only to realize there was so much more to their story? Or perhaps it reminds you of a moment when you stepped outside your comfort zone and discovered something beautiful about another culture, faith, or way of life. Barron's experience challenges us to ask ourselves, how often do we make assumptions about others? And how can we replace those assumptions with curiosity and openness? In the end, Barron's story is not just about him, it's about all of us. It's a reminder that we are more than the labels others place on us, more than the assumptions people make. We are complex, multifaceted individuals with stories worth telling and lessons worth sharing. And if we can learn to see each other not as categories or stereotypes, but as human beings with unique experiences and perspectives, perhaps we can begin to build a world that values understanding over judgment, connection over division, and empathy over indifference. If you enjoyed the story and found it meaningful, don't forget to leave a like. It really helps us reach more people. We'd also love to hear from you. Share your thoughts and the lessons you've learned in the comments below. Your insights could inspire someone